Hello and welcome back to Sleeping Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales whispered through the shadows of Sleeping Noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. I wanted to be pregnant more than anything. For a long time, it was all I could think about. Every late period gave me hope. Every negative test broke something inside me. Todd and I had been trying for months, and each month that passed made me feel like my own body was keeping something precious from me. Then it finally happened. 2 lines. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, holding the test in both hands, staring at it until my vision blurred. I laughed first, then cried, then laughed again. I pressed one hand to my stomach even though there was nothing to feel yet. A baby. My baby. I can't properly explain the love I felt in those first few days. It was too large for words. It was like something had opened inside me, something soft and bright and ancient. I was already imagining tiny clothes, little socks, soft blankets, sleepy mornings, birthday candles, first steps, first words. I hoped for a girl. I pictured a little daughter with ribbons in her hair, someone I could dress up and teach to jump rope. Someone who would ask too many questions and hold my hand in parking lots. But I would have loved a boy just as much. A wild little thing coming home muddy from fishing all day, grinning at me with scraped knees and dirt under his nails. It didn't matter. Girl or boy, this baby was mine. I started looking in the mirror several times a day, pulling up my shirt and turning sideways, trying to catch the first sign of a bump. I wanted proof. I wanted to see that the soul inside me was growing, thriving, taking what I gave and becoming real. It only took 3 weeks. That should have been my first warning. At 3 weeks, most women don't show at all. Some barely know they're pregnant. But my belly popped out suddenly, as if something inside me had grown overnight. It wasn't huge, not at first, but it was noticeable. A hard little swell low in my stomach, like someone had tucked a pound of oranges under my skin. I had always been thin. Too thin, some people said. Stick-like. Small-boned, but within days I looked visibly pregnant. Everyone noticed. Todd noticed first. He stood in the bathroom doorway one morning, toothbrush in his mouth, staring at my stomach. "Holy shit," he said, foam dripping slightly from his lip. "Already?" I laughed because I was happy, because I wanted to be happy. "Maybe it's a big baby," I said. Our friends said the same thing. My parents said I must be carrying twins. Everyone joked about how strong the baby was, how healthy, how it was already making itself known. We celebrated, and I let myself believe the size was a blessing. I was 20 and still living with my parents when Todd asked me to move into his apartment. It wasn't exactly a palace. He had a 2-bedroom place in a bad state, and that's me being kind. The furniture was old and sagging. Springs stuck out of the sofa. Empty food containers were stacked in corners. The kitchen counters were sticky. The bathroom smelled like wet towels and cheap soap. But we were having a baby together. That meant things had to change. Todd threw away a lot to make room for me. I helped him clean. We picked out new furniture together. We dragged broken chairs and stained cushions to the dumpster. I scrubbed the kitchen until my arms hurt. I told him he needed to grow up, and for the most part, he listened. The second bedroom became the nursery. As soon as my bump showed, I started planning it. Pale walls, a crib near the window, a changing table, a soft rug, maybe little animal decals if it was a boy, flowers if it was a girl. Todd painted while I sat in a chair and told him where he had missed spots. For a while, everything felt perfect. Then I kept growing. A few weeks later, I looked 5 months pregnant. People stared at me in stores. My mother kept asking if the doctor was sure there was only one baby. Even Todd started looking nervous when he thought I wasn't watching. But the doctor said there was only one. One baby on the sonogram. One heartbeat besides mine. Strong. Fast. Hungry. The doctor frowned a little at my size, but he said every pregnancy was different. He said some women showed early, especially if they were small. He told me not to worry, so I didn't. Not then. The cravings started soon after. At first, they were normal. Pickles, ice cream, salty chips, orange juice at strange hours, things people joked about, things that made Todd laugh and run to the store because he wanted to be a good father. Then I wanted steak. Not just steak, raw meat. The craving hit me one afternoon so strongly that I had to sit down. I could picture it perfectly. A thick fillet, barely seared, red and cold in the center. I didn't want it cooked. I wanted the warmth of the outside only for flavor. What I needed was the rawness, the iron, the softness, the blood. I tried to ignore it. I ate crackers, fruit, soup. Nothing helped. The need stayed in my belly like a hand squeezing from the inside. That night, Todd took me to a nice restaurant. I wore the fanciest maternity dress I owned, one from the nicer section at Target, and he told me I looked beautiful. I remember wanting to cry because he meant it. The restaurant served Wagyu, freshly transported, never frozen. When the waiter asked how I wanted mine cooked, I almost said blue. The word sat on my tongue. I wanted it barely touched by heat. But I was embarrassed, so I said rare. When the plate arrived, the smell made my whole body shiver. The seared crust glistened. Butter melted over the top. When I cut into it, the center opened soft and red, juices spreading across the plate. I ate as politely as I could. But inside, something in me wanted to pick it up with both hands and tear into it like an animal. Each bite filled me with pleasure so intense it almost frightened me. The baby shifted inside me, or at least I thought it did, and I smiled down at my stomach. When we finished, I ordered another steak to go. Todd laughed. "Still hungry?" "Baby is," I said. He put one hand on my belly and smiled. Then baby gets what baby wants. I should have remembered those words. In the middle of the night, I woke up because my stomach growled. Not a normal growl. It was loud enough to pull me out of sleep, deep and wet, like something inside me had opened its mouth. I lay still, one hand pressed to my belly. The baby kicked hard enough to make me gasp. I slipped out of bed carefully, leaving Todd asleep. The leftover steak was in the refrigerator, wrapped in the restaurant's swan-shaped foil package. I opened it with shaking hands. The smell rose up cold and rich. My mouth filled with saliva. I didn't heat it. I didn't put it on a plate. I lifted the steak in both hands and bit into it. After that, I barely remembered chewing. I tore it apart in mouthfuls, swallowing raw chunks, licking salt and blood from my fingers. I ate every piece, every bit of fat, every drop of juice left in the foil. When it was gone, I stood in the kitchen, breathing hard. Still hungry? No, not hungry. Empty. The craving had not gone away. It had only woken up. There was an all-night grocery store down the road with a deli counter. I knew because Todd and I had gone there once when he wanted cigarettes and milk at 1 a.m. I told myself I would be quick. I would buy what I needed and come straight back. There was no reason to wake Todd. I grabbed my purse and keys. At 2:30 in the morning, I backed my Honda out of the apartment complex parking lot. The streets were almost empty. I saw one other car the whole way. The grocery store's neon sign glowed harshly in the darkness, too bright against the empty road. I parked close to the door and went inside. The cashier looked at me strangely. I knew what he saw. A very pregnant young woman walking into a grocery store alone in the middle of the night, eyes too wide, hands pressed to her stomach. I ignored him and went straight to the deli. The butcher behind the counter looked just as surprised. I stared at the meat behind the glass. Ground beef, steaks, liver, kidneys, tongue. Chicken hearts packed in little trays. red and purple and pink, all of it shining under the cold case lights. It was hard to choose. I only had so much money. Finally, I asked for 2 pounds of freshly ground beef. The butcher wrapped it for me. I was about to leave when I saw something at the edge of the case. Cow brain. Pale, folded, slick-looking. My stomach clenched so hard I had to grip the counter. That was what I needed. Not wanted. Needed. The butcher noticed me staring. "You want that too?" I nodded. He wrapped it while I swallowed over and over, trying not to drool. The total came to $90. I paid without arguing. When I got home, Todd was sitting in the kitchen. The light was on. His hair was messy. He looked half asleep and worried. "Where the hell did you go?" he asked. I stood in the doorway holding the grocery bag. I had cravings. "At 2 in the morning? I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't want to wake you." His face softened a little. Todd was good like that. He could be messy and childish and lazy, but he loved me. He loved the baby. "Next time, wake me up," he said. "I'll go with you." Then he looked at the bag. "What did you buy? Meat? Are you about to eat it now?" I hesitated. "Yes." He gave a small laugh, then looked deeper into the bag. His expression changed. "Tara," he said quietly. "What is that?" He knew. There was no mistaking a brain for anything else. I chuckled nervously and closed the bag. "It's just for breakfast. Do you want me to cook it?" "No," I said too quickly. Then I forced a smile. "I'll cook it in the morning." He stared at me a moment longer, but exhaustion won. He sighed, kissed my forehead, and told me to come back to bed. I did, but I didn't sleep. I lay beside him with my eyes open, listening to his breathing deepen. When I was sure he was asleep, I slipped out of bed again and crept back to the kitchen. I pulled the meat from the refrigerator and laid it on the counter. My heart beat so fast I felt lightheaded. Sweat gathered on my forehead. My hands shook. I opened the package of ground beef first. The smell hit me. Raw, red, rich. I didn't cook it. I didn't even get a plate. I took a handful and shoved it into my mouth. It was incredible. Cold and soft between my teeth. Wet against my tongue, red juice ran down my chin and dripped onto my shirt. I ate handful after handful, barely chewing, swallowing as fast as I could. For a few minutes, I was in heaven. Then I remembered the brain. A sound came out of me, almost like a laugh. I grabbed it. The cow brain was cold and slippery in my hands. I lifted it whole and took the first bite. Pleasure flooded through me. Not just taste, something deeper. My mind filled with warmth, a kind of chemical happiness I had never felt before. The anxiety that had been buzzing inside me for weeks vanished. My thoughts sharpened, then softened. My belly stopped cramping. I moaned before I could stop myself. I closed my eyes and ate. When the kitchen light snapped on, I froze. Todd stood in the doorway. His face went pale. I turned slowly. Brain matter and red juice smeared across my mouth and chin, my hands full of what was left. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. "Tara," he whispered. I tried to explain. I told him it was cravings. I told him pregnant women ate strange things sometimes. I told him the baby needed it. I said everything I could think of, my voice soft and shaking, trying to calm him. Todd looked horrified, but he wanted to believe me. That was his weakness. He loved me enough to accept explanations that made no sense. Eventually, he nodded. "Okay," he said, though he didn't sound okay. "Okay, just maybe talk to the doctor tomorrow?" "Yes," I lied. We sat together for a while, then my stomach growled. The sound was low and deep. Todd heard it, so did I. And then I heard something else. His heartbeat, fast, strong, wet. It thudded in his chest like a drum. My mouth filled with saliva again. I looked at his head, at his skull, at the brain inside it. The cow brain had done something to me. Before eating it, I had felt like I was living only on sharp, wild excitement, all craving and panic. But after eating it, my whole mind had flooded with calm. Serotonin, that was the word that came to me. I don't know if it was science or instinct or something the baby whispered into my body. Dopamine was pleasure. Serotonin was balance. And the baby wanted balance. The baby wanted a brain, not cow, human. I went upstairs with Todd. I showered, I changed into clean pajamas. I got back into bed beside him. I lay with my back to his, gripping the sheets while my stomach cramped and begged. How would I kill him? That was my first clear thought. It scared me how practical it sounded. The second thought came quickly. How would I open his skull in the garage workshop? He kept all his tools in perfect order. If I could get to my parents' house while they were at work, I could borrow it. I could bring it back. I could cut Todd open. I loved Todd. I did. But I loved the baby more. That is the truth. Ugly or not, if my baby needed a human brain, then I would get one. I lay awake for hours trying to fight the thought. The craving did not fade. It grew stronger. My belly tightened. My body felt weak. Every minute I waited felt like I was starving the baby. Todd was a big man. He worked on oil rigs most of the time, and the work had made him strong. I was small and frail, especially now. I couldn't overpower him awake, but asleep? That was different. I got out of bed and searched the apartment for a weapon. The kitchen knife was the obvious choice. I stood in the dark kitchen, holding it, feeling the weight of it in my hand. Then I went back upstairs. Todd was asleep on his back. I climbed onto him. For 1 second, I hesitated. His face was peaceful. He looked younger when he slept. Softer, I remembered him painting the nursery wall. I remembered his hand on my stomach at the restaurant. Baby gets what baby wants. Then the baby kicked. Hard. I raised the knife. When it was over, Todd made a wet, gurgling sound in his throat and stopped moving. There was so much blood, more than I expected. It soaked the sheets, spread across the mattress, and painted my hands to the wrists. I sat beside his body for a long time, with my chest heavy and my mind strangely clear. Then I covered him with a blanket, in case he was cold. I touched his cheek gently. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I tried to sleep after that, and somehow I did. When I woke, sunlight filled the room. My belly was larger than ever, heavy, demanding. I knew my parents would both be at work. That was the time. I was weaker now. Walking down the stairs took effort. My legs trembled. My belly pulled at my body like it was draining me from the inside. Every delay felt dangerous. The slower I moved, the more I felt I was hurting my baby. I drove to my parents' subdivision, the one with the tall brick wall and the keypad gate. My hands shook as I entered the code. At their house, I went straight to the garage. My father had OCD, or at least that was what we always called it. Every tool had its place. Every shelf was labeled. I found the saw exactly where I knew it would be. It was heavier than I expected. I carried it awkwardly to the car and drove back to the apartment as fast as I dared. When I reached the bedroom, Todd was still under the blanket. For a moment, I almost cried again. Then my stomach cramped so badly I doubled over. The baby wanted it now. I didn't know what I was doing. I made a mess of it. I butchered the job. But eventually, I got through the skull. And when I reached Todd's brain, the smell made my knees weak. The first bite was warm, soft, rich, piquant. The pleasure was beyond anything I had ever felt. My whole body relaxed, my mind steadied. The baby shifted inside me, satisfied. I ate until there was nothing left. Then I had a body to deal with. That took hours. I don't want to explain every part. Not because I'm ashamed, though maybe I should be, but because the details don't matter. I chopped. I wrapped. I cleaned. I borrowed stronger cleaning supplies from the neighbor's storage area because ours weren't enough. I scrubbed until my arms shook. By the time I finished, the apartment smelled like bleach and meat. I crawled into the side of the bed that wasn't stained with Todd's blood and slept better than I had in my entire life. When I woke, I felt healthy, strong, clear. The baby was calm. For the first time in weeks, there was no panic in me. No buzzing, no hunger clawing through my gut, only peace. But peace does not last. I still have months left before the baby comes. I have done the math. I think I'll only need 3 or 4 more brains to make it through the rest of the pregnancy. Maybe less if they're fresh. Maybe more if the baby keeps growing this fast. I don't know much about my future. I don't know where I'll go when people start asking about Todd. I don't know how long I can keep pretending everything is normal. But I do know one thing. While I was chopping him up, I thought of my parents. The moment their faces entered my mind, the baby gave me a pain so deep and sudden that I thought I was going into labor. That was when I understood. It had chosen them. My parents are next. Story 2. Have you ever felt lightheaded out of nowhere while you're just out for a walk? It's not even that unusual. People blame it on low blood pressure, dehydration, getting older, standing up too fast. That's what I told myself at first. It started a few years ago. One moment I'd be fine, just walking like normal. And the next, it would hit me like someone had reached into my skull and gently tipped the world sideways. I'd slow down, take a breath, wait for it to pass, and keep going. I didn't worry until the day I actually dropped. It was bright summer weather, the kind of day that makes the woods look friendly. I'd gone for a short hike in a local forest not far from town. It wasn't remote, it wasn't dangerous. It was just trees, dirt paths, birds, and that warm green smell of leaves baking in sunlight. I was passing under an old willow tree when my knees buckled. I didn't black out completely, not like you see in movies. It was worse in a different way because I stayed aware of it. I went down hard onto my hands and knees, breathing fast, trying not to panic. The air felt thick. My head felt wrong, like pressure building behind my eyes. And then I felt something I still struggle to explain without sounding. It felt like my soul was being pulled out of the back of my head. Not a metaphor, not a dramatic way of saying I was dizzy. It was a physical sensation, like an invisible hook behind my skull tugging me backward. I stayed there under the willow, hands pressed into dirt, trying to keep myself from toppling over fully. After a minute or two, it eased up enough that I could get up and stumble home. I made a doctor's appointment as soon as I could. He ran the usual checks, heart, lungs, blood work, all the standard panels. He tested things I'd never even heard of. Everything came back fine. Vitamins and minerals were normal. Liver was normal, kidneys were normal. When I told him about the sensation behind my head, he ordered a brain scan just to be safe. The scan was unremarkable. That word is supposed to be reassuring. It felt like an insult. It meant there was no reason for what was happening to me. No neat explanation. No treatment plan. No take this and you'll be okay. He shrugged and told me to stay hydrated and keep an eye on it. Like I was describing occasional heartburn instead of something that made me collapse in the woods. I left the clinic feeling frustrated and weirdly alone. When there's a diagnosis, you can fight it. When there's nothing, you're just stuck with the fear that your body is doing something it isn't telling you. On the walk home, I spotted Mike Henderson down the street. The second his face entered my view, my heart jumped and I crossed to the other side without thinking, mostly to avoid the conversation I knew was coming. Mike wasn't a bad person, exactly. He was just obnoxious, loud, overconfident, the kind of guy who speaks like he's performing for an audience even when there's no one there. Of course, he didn't take the hint. He crossed the street, too, waving like we were best friends. "You, Liza. Long time no talk. How's the dog?" I stared at him for a second, then said flatly, still dead." His smile faltered. "Oh, right. Yeah. Condolences." Then he recovered fast, like that discomfort had bounced off him. "Hey, so me and the guys are going to throw a pizza party and play some Yu-Gi-Oh at the old lake house. You want to come?" The old lake house. Just hearing the word made my stomach tighten. It was a vacation home owned by an elderly woman in town. I didn't know her personally, but everyone knew the story. She'd had dementia and been in a nursing home for over a decade. Her family couldn't sell the place because it technically still belonged to her, and she wasn't mentally capable of signing anything. So the house just sat there empty, slowly rotting, while the family waited for time to do what it does. Normally, I love abandoned places. I like the quiet of them, the way they feel like museums of someone else's life. But that lake house was different. I couldn't explain it in a way that sounded logical. When you looked at it, you got this feeling, like you weren't meant to be there. Not like it was haunted in the dramatic sense, more like it was misaligned with the world, like it was a place that had been set down wrong. Also, Yu-Gi-Oh! I was pretty sure we'd all stop pretending we played that when we were 13. So I told Mike no. I told him I wasn't interested in going to that creepy place. He shrugged like he didn't care and turned away like the conversation meant nothing. I figured he mostly wanted me there because I was friends with his weed guy and he wanted a discount, not because he'd actually been concerned about me or my dead dog. When I got home, my mind went right back to my health issue. Lightheadedness, nausea, that strange pull at the back of my head. I'd hoped the doctor visit would calm me down, but it had done the opposite. Being told I was fine just made me feel like I was screaming into a void. I didn't feel like finding a different doctor yet, and with nothing else to try, I turned to the internet. Reddit, group chats, old question sites, anything. It was mostly useless. People suggested the same medical conditions I'd already been tested for. Others pushed weird supplements and fad diets. A few people told me it was psychosomatic, which is basically the polite version of you're making it up. I got very familiar with hearing that. I was starting to give up when I decided to post on an old-school health forum. I liked those places. They felt quieter than modern social media, like people actually read what you wrote. I posted my symptoms and was about to log off for the night when I got a direct message from a user named Staircase283. The message was short, no greeting, no explanation. You should stop going there. Confused, I replied, going where? Do I know you? The answer came back quickly. When you feel sick, it's a sign you need to turn around and go home. I actually laughed at that, not because it wasn't sensible advice, but because it was so obvious it felt pointless. Like telling someone with a broken arm that they should avoid lifting heavy things. So I typed back something casual, trying to keep it friendly. Well, yeah, probably I just don't like turning around in the middle of a walk, LOL. The response came a moment later. Do not go stray beyond the light of God. The hell, I whispered to myself. It sounded like trolling. Or someone mentally unwell, or someone quoting something they thought sounded deep. I stared at the screen, annoyed and uneasy at the same time. So I asked, what happens if I do? The next message made my skin go cold. You know you shouldn't, Liza. I hadn't told him my name. My username was random, brand new. I'd created the account for that post. My profile had nothing about me. No links, no personal details. And yet, there it was. I typed back, trying to pretend I wasn't unsettled. I'm gonna do it anyway, lol. No response after that. I could see he hadn't logged off, but he stopped replying. I sent another message. Then another. I closed my laptop and stared into the dark of my room, suddenly feeling like the world outside the walls had disappeared, like everything beyond the glass of the window was an empty stage. The inside of my room didn't feel like home either. It felt like a small lit box surrounded by something patient. The next day, I tried to think like a normal person again. I realized I'd never connected my symptoms to a specific place. I'd assumed it was random, tied to walking itself, but what if it wasn't random? So I decided to test it. Instead of walking my usual route, I took my bike. I figured if it was blood pressure or exertion, cycling might change it. I rode out toward the trail, past the underpass where the road dipped under the highway. And almost immediately, the symptoms hit. Lightheadedness. That sour nausea, the weird pull behind my head like something tugging at a hidden thread. I slowed down and kept writing, watching my own body like I was observing an experiment. As I passed a field of mugwort, the kind that always made me sneeze from the pollen, the symptoms got a little worse. Allergies? I wondered. Air quality, something in the plants? I stopped my bike near the willow tree where I'd collapsed the month before. I stood there for a moment, staring up into its branches. The tree looked ordinary, drooping green curtains and a thick, twisting trunk. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A piece of paper was wedged into the bark, not stuck under a rock like someone left a note, actually shoved into a split in the wood like the tree had swallowed it. I pulled it free carefully and unfolded it. It was a child's drawing, crayon or colored pencil, a girl, a tall man, and a door. They stood in a field of flowers. The style was simple, the way kids draw people as symbols more than anatomy. It didn't make sense, but I folded it and put it in my pocket. Then I turned my bike around, and as soon as I started riding away, the symptoms eased. The nausea faded first. The lightheadedness softened next. Within a minute, I felt almost normal again, like I'd stepped out of an invisible zone. That was the first time I understood it wasn't just walking, it wasn't exertion, or location, or both. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. If it was pollution or an allergen, turning around shouldn't have helped that fast. If it was mugwort, I should have still felt it on the way back. And why was there a drawing wedged into the exact tree where I collapsed? Mostly, I couldn't stop thinking about Staircase 283. I opened my laptop and searched his username. I found a Reddit profile with no picture and only one post, made years ago. It was in a subreddit called r/x102_37. When I clicked it, it said the post had been deleted by the original poster. I messaged him on Reddit, too. Who are you? How do you know my name? No reply. The next morning, I posted on a few forums asking if anyone knew the user. A few weeks passed before someone responded with something that felt like a real lead. They claimed they'd been friends with him through an online game, Warframe. They said he'd been normal for a while, then started changing. He began posting photos of the moon constantly. He sent cryptic messages about fault lines being wrong. Sometimes he'd explode into paranoid rants about being watched, about people following him, then apologize the next day without explaining. Other times he'd go quiet and distant, like nothing held his interest anymore. One time, when invited to play a game like old times, he replied only with, "It's cold when you get this deep." Then, on April 27th, 2019, he disappeared completely. Nobody had heard from him since. I checked the Reddit profile again. The single post was dated 2019. My stomach tightened. I messaged the forum user back. "Do you know anything else?" A real name, they replied later with a name they weren't sure how to spell. Lukashevchik. Sefsik. Something like that. I decided to stop digging for a while and go to the convenience store for food, just to reset my head. On the way, I passed Mike Henderson again. This time, he didn't wave, he didn't shout, he didn't even glance at me. He stood on the sidewalk, staring into space with this intense focus, like his mind was pinned to something only he could see. He looked exhausted, too, like he hadn't slept. It was so unlike him that I almost stopped to ask if he was okay, but he made me uneasy in a new way, so I kept walking. When I came out of the store, he was gone. Back home, I started searching the name. It took hours, but I eventually found a missing persons report from May 2019. A man named Lukashevchik had vanished from a town in Poland and was never found. There were posts from family asking for leads, no answers. Which made no sense because that same day I got an email, no subject line, just a message. "Are you coming?" It was from Staircase 283, not an email address. No @ symbol, no host. Just the name, like the concept of an email address, had been stripped away. My inbox shouldn't have accepted it, and yet it did. My hands started shaking. It wasn't just creepy anymore. It was impossible in a way that made my skin crawl. My sleep got worse after that. I'd wake up with cold sweat and no memory of what I'd been dreaming. Just a feeling that something had been in the room with me, standing quietly, waiting for me to notice. After a particularly bad night, I called my sister Beth. She'd gone to a good university in the city. We weren't as close day to day, but she was still the person I wanted when something felt wrong and I needed a voice that didn't belong to my own panic. "Hi, Liza," she said when she answered. "How are you?" "Hi, Beth. I'm okay. How about you? Are they working you to the bone yet?" She laughed. "Yeah, kinda. I'm on this tight deadline. Haven't been sleeping much." "Please try to sleep," I said automatically. "I'll try. What's new with you?" I hesitated, trying to figure out how to say it without sounding like I'd lost my mind. "Have you ever been stalked?" "No," she said, and her voice got sharper with concern. "Why?" "I don't know if it's stalking exactly," I said, "but someone online found my name and my email somehow. And they're messaging weird stuff." When I finished, she went quiet for a second. "That's weird," she said finally, "but it's not like definitely dangerous yet. Are you okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. "It's just creepy." Then Beth said something that surprised me. "Hey, remember those scary stories you used to tell me when we were kids?" I smiled despite myself. I used to tease her constantly. Ghost stories, urban legends, anything that made her hide under her blanket. "Well," she continued, "whenever you did, I had trouble sleeping. I kept imagining something coming into my room and just standing there. It terrified me." My smile faded a little. "But then I remembered I had you," she said. "I had Mom. I had people who would protect me. And that helped me stop being so scared." I forced a laugh, so that's why it stopped working. Beth giggled softly. "Look, Liza, I won't let anything happen to you, okay? Just call me. Thanks. Love you. Bye." When the call ended, the quiet of my room felt heavier than before. I knew she was trying to help, and it did help a little, but it also reminded me of something I didn't want to remember. That childhood feeling of being watched at night. The sense that there was a shape in the dark that wasn't moving because it didn't need to. I was still sitting there when I heard a sharp little sound at my window. Tack. I looked up. Tack. Tack. I stood and moved toward the window, and when I opened it, a pebble nearly smacked me in the face. Down below, Ethan Walsh stood in my yard, arm cocked like he'd been throwing rocks for a while. He was skinny, with a scruffy goatee and the kind of nervous energy that made him look like he was always about to apologize for existing. Next to him stood Catherine. I blinked hard. "What the hell, Ethan? Are you trying to serenade me? It's not even 1 p. Oh, Kath, hi. What are you doing with this dork?" Catherine lifted a hand and gave a small wave. Ethan shouted back up, "Don't badmouth me in front of Catherine. Look, can you come down? It's serious." I grabbed a coat and went outside. Ethan and I had been friends since 6th grade. He was anxious, kind of awkward, but funny and smart in his own way, always building some weird project. Catherine and I went back even further, but she'd moved to the next town years ago. Seeing her standing in my yard felt like time bending. I ran up and hugged her before I could stop myself. She hugged me back, but it was stiff, distracted. Then Ethan said, "Henderson's missing." I stared at him. "What?" "He's been gone 4 days," Ethan said, eyes fixed on me like he needed me to understand fast. "There's a police report. You didn't hear?" I remembered she'd had a crush on Mike Henderson back in the day. Maybe she still did. The three of us stood in a horrible little silence until Catherine said quietly, "Let's walk." We headed down the market street while she explained. She'd moved back about a month ago after dropping out of college. Not long after she came back, Mike had approached her and invited her to that pizza party at the lake house. She didn't even play Yu-Gi-Oh, but he'd asked in that charming way Mike had, and she'd agreed. She said the party started normal, pizza, drinks, people catching up. She was in the kitchen talking when she heard a knock from upstairs. That's when she realized something she hadn't noticed before. The lake house had a second floor, windows, roofline, the shape of it, but there were no stairs leading up there, no stairwell, no ladder, no access, like someone had removed every path to the top level. Then she heard footsteps above them. The entire house went quiet. Everyone stopped talking and listened. For a second, people were scared they'd been caught by the owners, but Catherine said that wasn't the real fear. The real fear was deeper, harder to name. Like whatever was up there was worse than an angry homeowner, worse than a cop. Mike, trying to look tough, announced he was going up anyway. He found a ladder in a closet, carried it around the front of the house, and climbed up to one of the second-floor windows. A few people watched him pull himself inside with a flashlight and disappear into the dark. They waited outside for what felt like forever. When he finally reappeared, he climbed down slowly, quietly, like his body had forgotten how to move normally. He didn't joke. He didn't brag. He just stood at the bottom of the ladder staring up at the window. Catherine hurried over and asked if someone was up there. He turned to her and his face was pale, but he said no. He said there was nothing, just empty cupboards and dust. Catherine left soon after with someone else. She said she'd had enough. According to others, Mike stayed, but he wasn't himself the rest of the night. He barely spoke. He kept staring off into space like the party was happening far away. Catherine tried to forget the whole thing until she ran into Mike again a few days later. That's when he finally told her what he'd really found. The room with the mattress was empty, but it didn't feel unused. The window was cracked open. A sharp nail stuck out from the frame, and there was a drop of blood on the sill. Mike thought it was a squatter who got spooked and fled out the window when the party started. Then he noticed a closet in the corner. The door was half open. He couldn't see inside. He said his heart dropped, the way it does when you know you're about to find something that can't be unfound. Still, he approached, flashlight raised, ready to swing at whoever might be hiding there. When he flung the closet door open, there was no person inside, just papers. Child drawings scattered and curled with age. And tucked among them, a stack of Polaroid photos with dates written on the backs, all dated about 10 to 14 years ago. Almost all of them were pictures of children sleeping. That alone was enough to make him sick. But the part that shattered him was this. He recognized one of the kids. He recognized himself. Someone had taken pictures of Mike Henderson sleeping when he was a child, and those photos had been kept in that closet for years, waiting. He recognized other kids in the photos, too. Catherine stopped walking and looked at me like she was about to hurt me with the next sentence. "You were in them," she said. My mouth went dry. What? It was me. Not a kid who looked like me. Me, my childhood bedroom, exactly as it had been 12 years ago. The posters, the bedding, the shape of the lamp on the desk, everything. And the photo was taken with a flash. That detail hit hardest, because it meant whoever took it wasn't hiding outside the room. They were inside. Close enough to light the whole space up and not care if I woke up. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the photo. Catherine told me the final Polaroid wasn't of a child at all. It was of an old metal staircase. Ethan swallowed hard and said, "The date on that one, it was February 2nd, 1983. I felt the ground tilt under me the same way it did on my walks, except now it wasn't my body doing it. It was my mind trying to protect itself by refusing to believe the numbers. Today is February 6th, 2023, I whispered. Catherine nodded, eyes glossy. And Mike went missing 4 days ago. My throat tightened. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. That was when I told them about Staircase 283. The messages. The way he knew my name. The way he'd emailed me from an address that wasn't an address. Ethan's face went pale as I spoke, and when I finished, he didn't look surprised. He looked like he'd been waiting for me to say it. Because the whole time I'd been searching for medical answers, the truth had been walking beside me, patient and quiet, just outside the edge of what I was willing to see. And now there was only one question that mattered, heavier than any symptom, heavier than any explanation. If someone had taken those photos, if someone had been in our rooms while we slept, then what exactly had Mike found upstairs in that lake house? And why did it feel like I was being asked the same thing Mike was asked before he disappeared? Are you coming? Story 3. Anthony, our camp counselor, leaned closer to the fire and dropped his voice into that dramatic, whispery tone adults use when they're trying to scare kids. In 2010, Jeffrey Epstein allegedly checked himself out, he said, drawing out the words like he was reading them off a haunted scroll. But the conditions were highly suspicious. Some people still think he's out there, waiting in the shadows, looking for little kids to take to his island, never to be seen again. He paused, grinning at the faces around the flames, then suddenly shouted, "Boo!" A bunch of campers screamed like they were trying to set a record. Someone actually fell backward in the dirt. Another kid started laughing and crying at the same time, which made the rest of them scream even harder because panic spreads faster than common sense. I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch. It was ridiculous. Total poppycock. Epstein wasn't real, and there wasn't anything lurking in the woods outside Camp Yahuwah waiting to snatch kids out of their sleeping bags. Anthony's story was just a lazy way to end the night and herd us into our cabins without anyone complaining. Still, as fearless as I acted, I couldn't deny that the darkness beyond the fire looked thicker than usual. The trees stood like tall, silent shapes, and the spaces between them felt too deep, too empty. The crackling fire kept trying to pretend the world was normal, but the woods around us didn't care. All right, one of the other counselors said, clapping his hands. That's enough. Bedtime. The counselors gathered us up and started marching us back to the cabins in a messy line. The walk wasn't long. It was only a few minutes down a dirt path, past the bathrooms, past the closed dining hall, and then into the little area where the cabins sat in rows like old wooden boxes. But the walk felt longer because the kids would not shut up. They kept whispering and giggling and arguing about Anthony's story like it was a real warning and not a campfire joke. Every other sentence was some new theory about how Epstein had escaped and ended up here, and how he was going to creep into the cabins and drag someone away while they slept. One kid claimed his cousin's friend knew a guy who saw a bald man near the lake last summer. Another kid said there were secret tunnels under the camp. Somebody else insisted that the island was actually connected to the camp by a hidden river, like we were living inside some stupid horror movie. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. These were the same kids who cried if a bug landed on them. But suddenly they were experts on kidnappers in the woods. By the time we reached the cabins, I was tired in that deep, irritated way where you don't just want to sleep. You need to, because if you don't, you'll start yelling at everyone. It was the last night of camp. Tomorrow morning, parents would come. Suitcases would get stuffed. Kids would hug their friends and promise to text. And then never text, and I'd get in the car, go home, and never come back to this place again. That was the plan. That was what I wanted. We shuffled into the cabin, and the counselors told us to change, brush our teeth, and get into bed. The lights clicked off, leaving only faint moonlight through the small cabin windows. And still, they wouldn't shut up. Whispering, snickering, nervous giggles. Someone asking, "What if he's outside right now?" Someone else saying, "Dude, stop, you're making it worse." Then another kid insisting they heard footsteps on the porch. Then 4 kids all talking at once about how they were definitely not going to sleep. I pulled my sleeping bag tighter and stared at the ceiling. I tried to ignore them. I tried to force my mind to go blank. I tried to focus on the familiar smells of the cabin, wood, dust, deodorant, and whatever cheap soap the camp used. But the noise crawled into my head anyway. The fear in their voices started to make the room feel smaller, like the cabin was shrinking around us. I closed my eyes and counted slowly, thinking eventually they'd tire themselves out. They didn't. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. It felt like my brain was being rubbed raw. Finally, I snapped out so fast my sleeping bag slid off me. I didn't say anything because if I opened my mouth, I knew I'd yell something cruel. Instead, I stood, grabbed my pillow, and shoved my feet into my shoes. "What are you doing?" someone whispered. "I'm sleeping somewhere quiet," I hissed back. A few kids immediately started panicking like I just announced I was walking into a minefield. "Don't go outside. That's literally what he wants." "Stop," I muttered. "He's not real." But they kept whispering warnings as I stepped out the cabin door. I let it shut behind me, cutting off most of their voices. The night air hit my face, cool and damp. The camp was quiet out here in a way it couldn't be inside, where kids were always breathing and rustling and talking. I headed toward the hammock strung between two trees near the cabins. It was one of those cheap camp hammocks that sagged in the middle, but right then it looked like the best bed in the world. I tossed my pillow into it, climbed in, and let myself sink down. The fabric cradled me. The trees above were black shapes against a darker sky. Finally, quiet. I felt my eyes getting heavy, and for the first time that night I thought, okay, I'm actually going to sleep. Crack. My eyes snapped open. I jolted upright so hard the hammock swung. My heart raced for half a second before irritation took over. "Stupid animals," I muttered, looking around into the dark. Even out here, I can't get any peace. The camp was still, no lights, no voices, just the distant chirp of insects and the soft hiss of wind in the branches. It was still the dead of night. Great, I thought. I probably slept for like 2 minutes. I tried to settle back into the hammock, but then... creak. The sound came again, not a crack like a branch snapping. A creak, like wood bending under pressure, like something shifting slowly, carefully. I held my breath and listened. Creak. It wasn't the hammock. It wasn't the trees swaying. It sounded closer, and it had a rhythm to it, like movement. I dragged myself out of the hammock, annoyed and half scared, despite how much I wanted to pretend I wasn't. If it was a squirrel or a possum or some raccoon digging through trash, I was going to scare it off and go back to sleep. I stepped into the grass and waved my arms, trying to look bigger than I was. "Shoo!" I called out. "Shoo! Shoo!" My voice sounded too loud in the quiet. It echoed a little between the cabins. The woods didn't answer. I took a few steps forward, still waving my hands like an idiot. "Go on," I said again, softer this time, like maybe yelling would make it worse. Silence, no rustling, no footsteps running away, no animal noises. For a moment, I felt proud of myself, like, there, problem solved. Then I turned back toward the hammock, and my stomach dropped. Someone was in it. At first, my brain refused to accept it. The hammock was a dark curve between two trees. The shadows could have been playing tricks. My eyes could have been adjusting. But the shape was wrong. It was the shape of a person lying there, making the fabric dip. I froze, staring. The rational part of my mind tried to argue, one of the counselors must be messing with me, or one of the campers followed me out here to scare me. But no one moved. The shape didn't shift or laugh or sit up. It was completely still, like it had always been there. A cold wave slid down my back. My mouth went dry. I took one step closer, then stopped. I didn't want to get close enough to confirm it was real. The hammock creaked again. Not from the wind, from weight. Then something moved inside the hammock. A slow adjustment, like whatever was in there was getting comfortable. And I don't remember deciding to run. My body just did it. My feet turned and I sprinted, not toward the cabin, not toward the counselors, but away. Like instinct had grabbed the wheel. The world blurred. The ground was uneven and I stumbled. Caught myself, kept going. My lungs burned. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I needed distance. Then everything went black. Not darkness like night, black like a curtain falling. When I woke up, I was somewhere else. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing because I couldn't match it to any part of the camp. The air smelled old, like dust and damp wood. My head throbbed, and my mouth tasted sour. I tried to sit up, and my shoulders hit something hard behind me. A wall. I blinked, forcing my eyes to focus. The room I was in looked old and decayed. The wallpaper was stained and peeling, curling off the walls in strips. There were no windows, no moonlight, no faint glow from outside, just dim, stale darkness that seemed to swallow sound. There was one door. It looked like the only way out, and it looked locked. The room was empty. No furniture, no mattress, no sheets. Just a bare floor beneath me, cold against my skin through my clothes. Except, in the far corner, barely visible, was a single bottle. Baby oil. I stared at it, trying to make sense of that detail, because my brain couldn't handle the bigger picture yet. My thoughts ran in circles, searching for something to grab onto. Where am I? How did I get here? Why does this room have no windows? Why is there only one door? And why, out of everything in the world, was there baby oil in the corner like it had been placed there on purpose? I swallowed hard and tried to stand. My legs trembled under me. The room felt like it was pressing in, like the air itself was watching somewhere beyond the door. I thought I heard a soft sound, not a voice exactly, more like breathing, slow, patient, waiting. Story 4. Between 1991 and 1997, there was a theme park in Sherwood, Arkansas called Excitement City. Based on the few surviving bits of information, it sounded like a pretty normal local amusement park, the kind of place families visited on weekends and teenagers went to in groups during the summer. It wasn't some massive destination park, but it was big enough to compete for attention in the region, and familiar enough that people compared it to places like Six Flags. If Excitement City is remembered at all now, it isn't because of its roller coasters or food stands or the usual harmless nostalgia people attach to parks like that. It's remembered because of one attraction that opened near the end of the park's life and somehow managed to poison the whole name. The attraction was called Total Terror. It only ran for a short window of time, sometime in late July or August of 1997, until early October, which is when Excitement City closed for good. That means it existed for weeks, not years, and yet it left behind stories that stuck harder than anything else the park ever did. Total Terror was advertised as something different, not just another haunted house or a scare maze with actors jumping out at you. According to the promotional material that's been pieced together, it was developed using experimental techniques to appeal to the animal side of the human mind in order to trigger as much fear as possible. That kind of language sounds like marketing nonsense now, the sort of edgy phrase a park would use to sell tickets to bored teenagers. Most attractions come with fake backstories anyway. They exaggerate. They make claims that aren't meant to be taken literally. It's part of the game. The problem with Total Terror is that the advertisement was apparently telling the truth. The developers really had experimented on people before the attraction opened. They weren't just testing it for fun or asking, is this scary? The way it's described in what little documentation still exists makes it sound like they were trying to push past normal fear responses and trigger something more basic, something older. Something they believed was wired into humans underneath our logic and personality. An animal mind, as they called it. Whatever method they used, the long-term effects were not properly observed. That part comes up again and again in the fragments that remain. They tested it, saw that it produced intense fear, and opened it quickly without fully understanding what it did to people afterward. And because it was new, because it was aggressively advertised, and because the promise of the scariest thing you'll ever experience works on a lot of people, Total Terror became one of the most popular attractions in the park for a brief period. Newspapers promoted it, Excitement City pamphlets highlighted it. People went out of their way to try it, daring each other, treating it like a badge of honor. The attraction itself, at least on the surface, didn't look like much. It wasn't a roller coaster. It wasn't even a walkthrough. It was a small rectangular room with chairs lining the walls. Each chair had heavy shoulder restraints, which already felt strange because, according to every description, the ride didn't physically move at all. The only other equipment was a headset, something like a virtual reality device placed over the rider's eyes. From the limited accounts that have been recovered, the headset didn't show a story or a monster or a haunted scene. Instead, it displayed a series of images, abstract shapes, and flashing lights in a very specific pattern. The idea, as far as anyone can tell, was that the sequence itself was engineered to bypass thought and go straight to instinct. The exact science is unclear. The real process, what frequencies, what rhythms, what visuals, has never been fully explained in public sources, and if official records existed at one point, they don't exist now. But the results were hard to ignore. People didn't come out laughing and shaking like they'd had fun in a scary way. Some came out acting like they'd survived something. Symptoms reported afterward ranged from what you'd expect after extreme emotional trauma to something much more severe. There were people who could barely speak, people who couldn't describe what they saw, people who refused to talk about it at all. A few accounts mention riders falling into a catatonic state, sitting or standing without responding as if they'd been emptied out. There were physical injuries, too, which is another detail that makes the attraction feel wrong. Since the ride didn't move, any injuries had to come from the riders themselves, how their bodies reacted to whatever they were experiencing. One of the most cited incidents involved a man named Michael Evans, 35, who dislocated his shoulder trying to force his way out of the restraints. That detail shows up in multiple write-ups as if it became a warning story told by staff and locals. Someone was so desperate to escape that he nearly tore himself apart. Another widely referenced case was a man named David Nash, 51, who suffered a heart attack during the attraction and died shortly afterward. Even in normal haunted attractions, people faint or panic, but a death changes everything. It turns too scary into unsafe, and it makes every other injury look more serious. What's striking is how little detail the victims gave afterward, at least in the accounts that survive. Most of the people who reported harm couldn't or wouldn't describe what they experienced in the headsets. Some just said it was lights and shapes. Others said it was nothing, yet their bodies told a different story. The lack of detail makes it harder to piece together what Total Terror actually did, but it also makes the situation more disturbing. If it was just a cheap horror show, people would have described it. If it was corny, they would have mocked it. Instead, the stories that remain are sparse, stiff, and evasive, as if language failed. After reports started piling up, mental damage, panic episodes, injuries, and at least one death, Total Terror was shut down. But what happened next is what pushed the whole thing into rumor and obsession. Excitement City itself was shut down soon after. The timeline suggests that the attraction didn't just become a liability, it became a threat to the park's survival. Whether the closure was because of lawsuits, government involvement, insurance cancellation, or something else isn't clear from what's publicly known. But the shutdown wasn't followed by the normal trail of paperwork and news coverage you'd expect. Instead, advertisements and articles about Excitement City were destroyed. Reports disappeared. Information about the park, especially about Total Terror, became scarce in a way that doesn't happen by accident. Local newspaper archives are missing relevant pages. Pamphlets are hard to find. Even photos are rare. And that's part of why the story still circulates. Because the few pieces that survive have become valuable. People who collect strange ephemera, old pamphlets, newspaper clippings, ticket stubs, will pay huge amounts for anything tied to Excitement City, especially anything that mentions Total Terror. And then, just as quickly, listings go down. Items vanish. Sellers claim they were contacted and asked to remove them. A few claim their items were confiscated or destroyed. It's hard to prove those claims, but the pattern is there often enough that people notice. The end result is that Excitement City now exists mostly as a shadow, A park that ran for 6 years and then vanished so thoroughly that it feels less like a business that failed and more like something that was deliberately erased. And at the center of that erasure sits total terror. A small room, a set of chairs, shoulder restraints that shouldn't have been necessary, and a headset that showed people something they didn't have words for. The strangest part is that nobody has ever managed to explain one simple thing in a way that satisfies the story. If total terror was only lights and shapes, why did so many people come out broken? And if it wasn't only lights and shapes, what exactly did the headset show that made the park decide it was safer to disappear than to let anyone keep asking? Story 5. What if you could have everything you ever wanted and more? Would you say yes right away? Or would you back away? What if someone promised they could fix your life, erase your mistakes, even bring back the person you loved most? That sounds like an easy choice when it's just a question. It stops being easy when you're desperate enough to believe. My name is Charlie, and this is what happened when I met the man in black. I'm 28. I live in my parents' basement. Go ahead, call me a loser. I've heard it before, mostly from myself. A few years ago, I had a decent job and enough money to feel like an adult. I wasn't rich, but I was doing okay. I thought I was building a normal life. Then, I lost Layla. Not to death, not at first. I lost her in the way that makes you feel even smaller. Because there's no funeral, no clean ending, no reason you can point to and say, that's why. She left me for Chad. Chad was everything I wasn't. A tech millionaire with a view from the top floor of the tallest building in the city. He had an office bigger than my whole house. The kind of guy who could buy happiness the way other people buy coffee. Fancy dinners, new cars, private trips, VIP tickets to concerts I didn't even care about. I remember Layla laughing once about how Chad could get VIP Jonas Brothers tickets like it was nothing. And my stomach twisted because I knew she wasn't laughing with me. She was laughing at the kind of life she was stepping into. She was gone fast, like she'd been waiting for the right door to open. And after that, I fell apart. I lost my job, I went broke. I stopped trying, I didn't do it all at once. It was little pieces at a time. Sleeping in longer, showering less, sending out job applications just to shut my parents up, not because I believed anything would come of them. Letting the days bleed together until I couldn't remember what month it was without checking a calendar. My parents hated me for it, or at least that's how it felt, like it was my fault Layla left, like I should have been able to control her, like if I'd been better, richer, more impressive, she'd still be mine. Most days I stayed in the basement, watching old reruns of Gunsmoke and The Twilight Zone, zoning out until my brain went quiet. I wasn't living. I was just passing time. Then one night I couldn't breathe down there anymore. It was storming. One of those nights where the sky looks bruised and the wind sounds angry. I was sick of sleeping all day, sick of staring at a screen, sick of my own thoughts. Your mind really is your worst enemy when it has too much space to roam. So I left the house and went for a walk. There's a park close to where I live. I don't even like that park. It's small and poorly lit, and the paths always feel damp. But it was empty, and empty sounded good. It was around 11, maybe later. Time didn't matter to me anymore. I didn't have anywhere to be, nothing I was looking forward to, no schedule that meant anything. The rain was light, more like mist, but enough to make the air smell clean. Wet grass, wet dirt, trees shaking above me. The whole place felt alive in that quiet way nature has at night, like the world is still moving, even when you're not. I found a bench and sat down, letting the sound of the rain fill my head. I remember thinking for the first time in weeks that maybe I could be okay. Not happy, not fixed, but okay. Then someone sat down next to me. I didn't look at him right away. I didn't want to deal with people. I don't enjoy conversations on a good day. And that night I was running on pure exhaustion. I was about to stand up and leave without saying anything when he spoke. "Hello, son. What brings you out here so late?" His voice was deep with a southern tone that didn't fit. I live in New York. You don't hear that voice often, and when you do, it usually comes with a story behind it. I stood up as I answered, because I didn't want to sit beside a stranger in a dark park. Nothing, I said. Just walking, clearing my head. I don't really talk to strangers. And I'm not in the mood, I can tell, he said, calm as ever. You look like you need help. I let out a sharp laugh. No thanks. What if I told you I can help you? He stood up and stepped closer. He was tall, around 6'2". He wore a black trench coat and a black hat, the kind people don't wear unless they want to be noticed. Round glasses sat on his face like something you'd see on a rock star from the 70s. As he stepped into the faint light, I saw how pale he was. Not sick pale, not winter pale. More like the color had been drained out of him a long time ago and never came back. Then I saw his teeth when he smiled. Too white, too sharp. And he smelled like dead roses, like flowers left in water too long until they turned sour. My stomach clenched. No, I said, backing away. I'm good. Have a nice night. I started to walk, and then he said 2 words that stopped me like someone had grabbed the back of my shirt. Auto me. I don't know why that phrase hit me the way it did. It wasn't even English, at least not the way he said it. It sounded like an old command, something meant to lock a door inside your head. I turned back. He was smiling like he'd caught me. I know about your situation, Charlie, he said. How you've been broke, how nothing goes your way, how your heart feels cold without your lady. My blood turned icy. I don't know how you know my name, I snapped, or what kind of game this is, but fuck off. Oh, this ain't a trick, my boy, he said smoothly. I help people like you. I can change your life. Think about it. Meet me back here tomorrow night. I walked away fast, trying to act like I didn't care. Yeah, okay, I muttered over my shoulder. Whatever you say. I got home and felt a chill crawl up my spine. The hairs on my neck stood up like my body was still reacting even though my brain was trying to pretend it was nothing. I lay in bed replaying the conversation, turning it over and over. How did he know my name? How did he know about Layla? Did my parents hire someone to scare me into getting my life together? Were they that desperate? But then another thought pushed through all the suspicion. What if he could help me? What if he actually had something? Money, connections, some weird ability that could fix everything. I didn't believe in magic. I didn't believe in deals with strangers. But desperation makes you stupid. It makes you reach for anything. I convinced myself I'd at least hear him out. What's the worst that could happen? The next night, I went back to the park. I waited at the bench, staring at the wet path, feeling more embarrassed than afraid. He wasn't there. I told myself I'd been right. Some old creep messing with me or my brain turning stress into paranoia. I started walking away. Then a voice spoke behind me, close enough that I could feel breath on the back of my neck. Ah, I see you came back, boy. I spun around. He was standing behind me like he'd been there the whole time. You must have thought long and hard about what I said. How do you know my name? I demanded. What is this? Did my parents set you up? He chuckled. Rest assured, boy, this ain't a game, and no one tells me what to do. He stepped closer, and the smell of dead roses got stronger. I do as I please, he said, and I help who I want. I know everything, Charlie. I work in ways you wouldn't believe. I'm right and wrong, good and bad, dark and light. His grin widened. And I can make your dreams come true. How? I asked, even though my mouth felt numb. Why help me? I'm nobody. I've got nothing to offer you. That part's true, he said cheerfully. You don't have anything to offer me. Then his voice lowered. But there are things I could use your help with. Things I can't do on my own. Like what? I said. I'm not doing anything for free. How can I trust you? How do I know you'll actually help me? He tilted his head. Trust is an illusion. Then, like he was doing me a favor, he spread his hands. Tell me what you want. My throat tightened. Saying it out loud felt humiliating, like admitting weakness. But I said it anyway. I want my life back, I whispered. I want a good job. I want money. I want my girl back. His smile stretched wider than it should have. Under the glasses, his eyes looked wrong. Black as midnight with a faint red tint, like embers deep in a fire. "Ah, Charlie," he said softly. "I knew you were the one I was looking for." He leaned in close enough that my skin prickled. "You'll work for me," he said, "and I'll pay you handsomely. As for your girl, she'll be back in time. Go home. In 2 days, meet me here again." I opened my mouth to argue, but a crack sounded from the trees behind me. I turned, expecting to see an animal. When I turned back, he was gone again. I went home and couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop. Was he real? Was he insane? Was I insane? Was this some elaborate setup? Then, the next morning, something happened that made belief feel dangerous. My mom banged on my basement door. "Charlie, you have a letter." I hadn't gotten real mail in forever. If anything came for me, it was junk. Coupons, fake credit offers, scammy, pre-approved nonsense. I trudged upstairs and she handed me a red envelope with only my address on it. No return address, no stamp. I went back downstairs and opened it. Inside were 3 things: a check for $5,000, a note, and a letter. My hands started shaking. $5,000 wasn't life-changing money, but to me it might as well have been a suitcase full of gold. I stared at it so long my eyes burned. I told myself it had to be fake, so I went to the bank. I fed the check into the ATM, half expecting the machine to swallow it and flash some warning. Instead, it processed like it was normal. My account updated exactly $5,000. I walked home in a daze and only then remembered the note and letter. The note was written in red ink. "Charlie, my boy, I hope this finds you. I know it will. I sent you a little gift to show you can trust me like you asked. All I need from you is to open the letter inside, sign at the bottom, and bring it to me when we meet again. Signed, your friend." I opened the letter. It was blank. No terms, no promises, no explanation, just one line at the bottom for my signature. I stared at it for a long time. My gut screamed not to sign. My brain told me I'd be an idiot to sign a blank document for a stranger. But the money was real. The man was real. And Layla was still gone, and I still woke up every day feeling hollow. I signed it. 2 nights later, I met him under the same dying tree in the park, where the light always seemed weaker than it should be. He was waiting. I handed him the signed paper. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it, which is the part I hate the most now. "I don't know how to repay you, but I'll do whatever I can." He smiled like I'd said exactly what he wanted. "That's why I like you," he said. "A go-getter, a man willing to do what it takes. If I'm working for you, what is this?" He laughed quietly. "Son, I am the business. I'm the owner, the CEO. Everything you see is mine." Then he looked at me like I was an object he'd purchased, and now he said, "So are you." I forced a laugh, trying to keep it light because I didn't like the cold feeling in my chest. "Yeah, okay. Don't get weird. You're not taking my soul or anything. All in good time, my boy," he said. And the way he looked at me made my stomach drop, like he found my joke funny for a reason I didn't understand. "There's a tall building in the city," he continued. "I'm sure you know which one. Tomorrow at 8 a.m., stand in front of it. Stay there until 5:55 p.m. After that, meet me back here in 2 days. You want me to stand outside a building all day?" "Precisely," he said. "Follow your gut, my boy." Chad's building. The next morning I got up early and went to the city, to that glass tower that always made me feel small when I looked up at it. The sky was dull, the streets quieter than usual, like the city was holding its breath too. I stood there all day. I didn't know what I was waiting for. I just waited. The hours crawled. People passed. Some glanced at me, most didn't. My feet hurt. My back hurt. My mind kept drifting into ugly thoughts and then snapping back. At 5:55 p.m., I finally turned to leave, irritated and relieved. Nothing happened. It had been nothing. Then I heard a sound that didn't belong. At first, it reminded me of rain, a quick, sharp patter. But it wasn't rain. It was glass, shattering onto concrete in 1,000 pieces. Then, a wet, heavy impact hit the ground. A body. Chad. I recognized him immediately, and my brain refused to accept it. My legs locked. I couldn't move. The sound of him hitting the pavement wasn't like a person falling. It was like a bag of meat thrown against a wall. Blood splashed. People screamed. Someone cried out like an animal. I didn't run to him. There was nothing to do. No one survives that. I ran home instead. I ran so hard my vision blurred. When I got inside, I threw up. I couldn't breathe. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I turned on the TV, and there it was on the news. Chad had shattered his office window with a chair and jumped. The report said police were on their way to arrest him. He'd been stealing millions from the company. I stared at the screen, numb. How could this be happening? Why did the man in black want me there? Was it his doing? Or had he just known? Had he put me in place like a witness, like a stamp of approval? I hated Chad. I did. But watching him die like that didn't feel like justice. It felt like something rotten had opened under my feet and I'd stepped into it. The next day I couldn't leave bed. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the impact again. Then my phone lit up. Layla. My heart nearly stopped. She texted me like nothing had happened. She said she wanted to talk. She said she was coming home in 3 days. She didn't mention Chad. She didn't sound shaken. It was like his death hadn't touched her at all. I didn't care. I hate admitting that, but it's true. All I could think was, she's coming back. This is what I wanted. That same day, another red envelope arrived. This time, there was a check for $15,000 and a note in red ink. You did well, my boy. I had to know I could trust you to do as you're told. Here's a token of my gratitude. Signed, your friend. When it was time to meet him again, I almost didn't go. I wanted to vanish. I wanted to throw the checks away. Tell Layla not to come. Pretend none of it had happened. But I also didn't want to lose her again. So I went. He was under the same dying tree. The smell of dead flowers was stronger than ever. He looked pleased with himself, relaxed, like this was all ordinary business. There's my favorite employee, he said. I'm very pleased with you. You do as you're told. I don't understand why you made me be there, I said, voice shaking. I'm grateful, yeah, but I don't want to be part of people dying. He smiled like I was adorable. Charlie, it's simple, he said. I had to see if you could follow instructions. Be a good boy. The rest was up to fate. He tilted his head. There are bad people in this world, son. Sometimes they need a little push. I don't care about bad people, I snapped. I just want my life back. And you will, he said. Now I have one more job for you. Do this right, and you can go live that life you want. You'll be free. For now. I swallowed. Fine, as long as I'm not hurting anyone. His smile didn't change, but his eyes did. This one is important, he said. Listen close. He told me about a man named Mr. Wallace in a retirement home, 99 years old, a former doctor, a killer according to him, who sabotaged surgeries on purpose. He told me the layout, the timing, the room number, how there would be no guards, no cameras, no one to stop me. I want you to sneak into his room, he said, and kill him. My blood ran cold. What the fuck? I said. No, I'm not killing an old man. His expression changed. The warmth vanished. The air felt colder. Boy, he said, voice low, you will do as I say. Remember, you work for me. Then he leaned closer, and the smell of dead roses filled my nose until I felt sick. "It would be a shame," he murmured, "if a certain plane doesn't make its way home safe." My lungs locked. "You leave her out of this," I whispered, shaking. "Pray to your God," he said calmly. "You already made your deal with me. Now get to work. You have till sunrise." I stood there under that tree, numb, staring into the dark. It was almost midnight. Sunrise in 6 hours. I called Layla, texted her, over and over, begging her not to get on the plane, begging her to wait, begging her to stay where she was. No answer. So I went to the nursing home. The doors were unlocked, no guard, no nurse, no one in sight. The halls were quiet in a way that felt wrong, like the building itself had been emptied for me. I walked 6 doors down, just like he said. I opened the door. Mr. Wallace was there, asleep, frail, hooked up to life support. The room was freezing, cold enough that I could see my breath. My heart pounded so hard it made my hands shake. How could I do this, even if he was everything the man in black claimed? How could it be my job to decide he dies tonight? Then I heard a weak voice. "He sent you," the old man whispered without opening his eyes. "Didn't he?" I froze. "I knew my days were numbered," he continued, voice thin. "Do what you must. I'm ready. But listen, kid, don't trust him." My throat tightened. I reached for the plug anyway. I pulled it. The old man gasped and shook, reaching for air that wasn't there. He made sounds that didn't even feel human. He cried out once, but softly, like he already knew no one would come. I ran. I ran out of the room, out of the building, and I didn't stop until I got home. I threw up again, shaking so badly I could barely stand. What have I done? I told myself it was over now. It had to be. I'd paid the price. Layla would be safe. She'd come home, and we'd start over. I slept a little, but it wasn't real sleep. It was nightmares and guilt and that one sentence repeating in my head. "Don't trust him." Morning came, and Layla texted me. Her plane was boarding. I begged her not to get on. I begged her like my words could reach across the world and physically stop her. It was too late. That afternoon, I turned on the TV and felt my soul drop out of my body. A plane crash. The pilot was drunk, they said. The plane went down. Everyone died. Everyone except one person. A female survivor. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see straight. Layla's parents called. She was alive, but critical. They didn't know if she'd make it. I drove to the hospital so fast I don't remember the roads. When I got there and walked into her room, the air was cold as ice again, just like the nursing home. Layla lay in the bed like a broken doll. The doctor said coma, broken spine, damage everywhere. The kind of words that mean life will never go back to what it was. And all I could think was, this is my fault. If I'd let her go, if I'd accepted the pain and tried to heal like a normal person, if I'd learned how to live without her instead of trying to buy her back, then the door opened, and he walked in, the man in black. Rage hit me so hard I shook. "What the fuck did you do?" I screamed. "I did what you asked. You were supposed to leave her alone." He smiled like a proud teacher watching a student succeed. "Charlie," he said softly, "we were never done. And I gave you what you wanted, didn't I? She's here. She's alive. She's yours to care for now, forever." Tears poured down my face. I didn't even wipe them away. "I never want to see you again," I sobbed. "We're done. Leave. I wish I never met you." "Oh boy," he said, almost gently. "We're never done. When I need you again, I'll find you." He turned toward the door. "Enjoy this time I've given you," he said over his shoulder. "Next time, I have much more in store." Then he left. That was the last time I saw him for years. Layla is still in a coma. After everything, I got a check in the mail. So much money I'll never have to work again, enough to stay by her side every day for the rest of my life. Some people would call that a gift. It feels like a cage. So here's what I'm telling you, whoever you are reading this. If you ever want something so badly you'd do anything for it, remember this. There is a man out there who will offer you everything: money, love, revenge, a second chance, the world. Please say no to him, because the price doesn't show up at first. The price comes later when you can't undo what you've done. And tonight, I got another red letter. It only said this: "It's time, my boy. I'll be seeing you soon. I don't know how to break free, but I have to find a way, because I can't lose her again, and I can't lose myself." Story 6. I see them in my dreams. Their eyes are the first thing I remember every time I wake up. Empty eyes, dead eyes, eyes that look like they were made only to stare and never to understand. Their smiles are worse. Twisted, stretched, unnatural smiles that look like someone tried to copy happiness without knowing what happiness was. Even after I wake up, even when I sit upright in bed with my throat raw from screaming, their voices do not stop. The song stays with me. It echoes inside my skull like it was carved there. You have no idea how long I have lived with this. It started 10 years ago when I was 15. At first, it was only nightmares. I would dream of strange faces watching me from dark corners. I would dream of heads trapped inside impossible shapes smiling up at me while they sang that same nonsense song again and again. I would wake up sweating, shaking, and confused, but at least back then, waking up helped. Then I started hearing them during the day. At first, it was faint, a sound from another room, a tune under the noise of the shower, a whisper from inside a wall. I would stop what I was doing and listen, and there it would be, thin and distant, almost playful. Then came the visions. I saw them in reflections, in windows at night, in the black screen of my phone before it lit up. Sometimes, while walking down the street, I would see one peeking from between parked cars, smiling with that awful mouth. By the time I blinked, it would be gone. I told myself I was sick. I told myself my brain was broken. That was easier to believe than the alternative. Before anyone asks, yes, I tried to get help. I tried everything: doctors, medication, therapy, retreats, breathing exercises, sleep studies, herbal nonsense, expensive nonsense. I swallowed pills with names I could barely pronounce. I sat across from professionals who nodded carefully while I described the things I saw. Some looked concerned. Some looked at me like I was wasting their time. Nothing worked. No medication silenced the voices. No treatment kept the nightmares away for long. Some made me sleep more heavily, but that only trapped me deeper inside the dreams with them. Some made me feel numb, but the entities still came through. They were louder than any chemical haze, sharper than any delusion my doctors tried to name. I gave them names over the years. When I was younger, I called them the encased because they always seemed trapped inside strange shapes. Then I called them hole dwellers, then limbless. For a while, I called them the singers. Now I just call them bullheads. Please don't ask me why. I know it sounds stupid. I know it sounds like something a child would say. But after years of fear, even terror starts to become ordinary in small, humiliating ways. You name the thing hurting you because naming it feels like control, even when it is not. They always sang the same line, a meaningless rhythm, a broken chant, childish almost. That was part of what made it unbearable. Something so stupid should not have been able to fill me with dread. It should not have made my stomach twist or my hands shake. It should not have followed me through 10 years of my life, but it did. The nightmares became worse as I got older. They started showing me people I loved. My mother, my father, old friends. The bullheads would surround them, grinning, singing, hurting them in ways I still cannot fully describe without feeling my chest tighten. A few days before everything changed, I dreamed they were eating my mother alive. They moved like animals, but their teeth were too human. They tore at her while she screamed, and all the while they sang that same awful chant. Their faces looked pleased, not hungry. Pleased, like her pain was entertainment. I woke up crying and nearly threw up beside the bed. For years, they only hurt me inside my mind. That was horrible enough. Then came last June. I was staying at my parents' house for a couple of weeks because of a job opportunity in the area. I had not lived there for years, but my childhood bedroom was still mostly the same. Same old dresser. Same faded marks on the wall where posters used to hang. Same narrow window facing the backyard. That week had been strangely quiet. Too quiet. The visions almost stopped. The song faded. I still felt watched, but I did not see them as often. At first, I thought maybe being home had helped somehow. Maybe familiarity gave my mind something stable to hold on to. But the quiet did not feel peaceful. It felt like waiting. Like the bullheads had stepped back behind some thin curtain and were gathering there, watching me from a place just outside human sight. Then, one night, I woke up at exactly 2:32 a.m. I don't know why I remember the time so clearly. I just do. The red numbers on the clock beside the bed were bright in the dark. 2:32. I had not woken from a nightmare. I did not need to use the bathroom. I was not groggy or confused. One moment I was asleep. The next I was sitting upright in bed, fully awake. The room was still. The house was silent. Then I heard it. From somewhere below me, deep in the basement, came the song. My blood turned cold. At first, I tried to tell myself it was only another hallucination. I had heard things before. I had seen things before. This was not new. This was my sickness doing what it always did. But something inside me knew this time was different. This time, the sound had weight. It moved through the house like a real noise. It echoed faintly through the floorboards. It came from a place not from inside my skull. The song was soft at first, just barely audible. Then it grew clearer, that ridiculous chant. That awful rhythm, my body started shaking before I even got out of bed. Every sensible part of me wanted to leave. I should have run upstairs, woken my parents, grabbed my keys, and driven away. I should have done anything except follow the sound. But curiosity is a cruel thing. Fear can freeze you, but sometimes it also pulls you forward. I needed to see. After 10 years of being tormented by things nobody else believed in, I needed proof. I needed to know if something was really there. So I got up. I left my bedroom and walked through the dark house. Each step felt wrong. The hallway outside my room was familiar, but at night it looked stretched and hollow. The family photos on the wall watched me pass. The stairs creaked under my feet as I descended to the main floor, then toward the basement door. The song was louder there. I opened the basement door. A cold breath of air moved up the steps. The basement below was black except for a faint blue glow coming from under the bathroom door. My parents' basement had always made me uneasy, even before the nightmares started. It smelled like old carpet, dust, and damp concrete. The ceiling was low. The corners collected shadows. When I was a kid, I used to run up the stairs because I always felt something behind me. Now I walked down slowly. The song grew louder with each step. By the time I reached the bottom, my heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. The blue light under the bathroom door flickered slightly. The rest of the basement remained dark. I walked toward the door. My hand shook as I reached for the knob. I pushed it open. The bathroom was lit by a dim, unnatural glow coming from the toilet. The lid was up. The water inside shone pale blue. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the surface began to bubble. Foam rose from the bowl, thick, white, dirty foam. The water churned like something beneath it was forcing its way upward. Then a head emerged. A human head, or something that looked like one. It rose slowly out of the toilet bowl, wet and shining. The skin was too detailed, too real, every pore and wrinkle visible in the blue light. Its hair clung to its skull. Its mouth stretched open in a grin that nearly split the face in half. Then it sang. The sound blasted through the bathroom, loud and shrill. Skibbity dop dop yes yes. The words were nonsense, but hearing them from that thing's mouth nearly broke me. It was the same song from the dreams, the same voice, the same rhythm that had haunted me since I was 15. I screamed. The head's eyes rolled toward me. Dark red tears began leaking from them, running down its cheeks and dripping into the bowl. Its grin widened. Skibbity, skibbity, yes, yes. It shrieked again. I tried to move, but my feet would not lift. At first, I thought I was frozen with fear. Then I looked down. Something wet and pale had spread across the floor from the base of the toilet, sticking to my shoes like glue. It held me there while the thing sang and smiled. I pulled hard. One shoe came free with a horrible sucking sound. Then the other. The moment I could move, I ran. I slammed into the bathroom door frame and stumbled into the basement. Behind me, porcelain scraped against tile. I looked back. The toilet had torn itself free from the floor. Pipes hung beneath it like wet roots. Water and something darker spilled across the bathroom tiles. The head in the bowl screamed its song as the whole thing hopped forward. It chased me. I ran up the basement stairs, taking them two at a time. Behind me, the toilet slammed against the steps with heavy, cracking impacts. Thud, thud, thud. It was climbing after me. The song followed, louder and louder, filling the stairwell. I burst into the kitchen, gasping. My mind was no longer working clearly. I grabbed the first thing I saw from the counter, a large kitchen knife, and turned just as the toilet reached the top of the stairs. It lunged. I stabbed at the head. The blade went into one of its eyes. The thing shrieked, but not in pain, in excitement. I stabbed again and again. The eye collapsed around the blade, leaking dark fluid, but the creature did not stop. Its mouth snapped at my hand. Its teeth closed around my fingers, and pain exploded up my arm. I screamed and jerked back. Blood ran down my wrist. The knife slipped from my grip. The creature swallowed it. I heard the blade scrape down inside its throat. Then it sang again. It hopped past me, toward my parents' bedroom. No! I shouted. I ran after it, slipping on the wet trail it left behind. My parents' door was half open. The creature slammed into it, forcing it wide. My mother woke first. She sat up in bed, confused, her hair messy, eyes still heavy with sleep. Then she saw it. She screamed. The toilet leapt onto the bed. The head's mouth opened impossibly wide. I do not want to write what happened next in detail. I cannot. The memory still comes back too clearly when I close my eyes. There was blood on the sheets, the wall, the ceiling. My mother's scream stopped too suddenly. My father woke and threw himself at it. He punched the thing again and again, shouting words I could not understand. His fists struck porcelain and flesh. It did nothing. The creature turned on him. The song became louder, almost joyful. I stood in the doorway, useless. I watched the thing kill my father, too. By the time silence returned, the bedroom was red. The toilet sat on the bed between what was left of them. The head turned slowly toward me. Its broken eye hung loose. Blood ran down its face. The grin remained. Skibbity, dop, dop, yes, yes, it whispered. That was when I ran. I ran out of the house without shoes. I jumped into my car with bloody hands and drove away. I do not remember where I went first. I only remember the road, my own screaming, and the song still echoing in my ears. That was months ago. At least, I think it was months. Time has felt strange since that night. The police report called it an animal attack at first, then a break-in. Then they stopped telling me anything directly. They asked questions I could not answer in a way that made sense. No one believed me. Of course they didn't. I would not have believed me either. But I know what I saw. Since then, the nightmares have become constant. I see the bowl heads every night. I hear the song in running water and pipes and drains and the hum of bathroom fans. I cannot go near toilets. I cannot stand the sight of open bathroom doors. I keep containers in my apartment because I do not trust plumbing anymore, and I hate what my life has become. I barely sleep. When I do, I wake screaming. I do not want to describe all the things I have done trying to force myself into rest. Some of them were dangerous. Some of them were stupid. None of them helped. Nothing blocks out the song for long. The worst part is that I think the thing from the basement was not the first. I think it was only the first one that crossed over fully. The others are still watching from wherever they live. They are still singing from behind the walls of sleep, still smiling with their dead eyes, still waiting for another door to open. Sometimes, late at night, I hear water bubbling in the bathroom even though the door is locked and caped shut. Sometimes I hear porcelain scrape against tile, and sometimes just before morning when the world is dark and quiet, I hear my mother's voice from the pipes. She asks me to let her in. Then the bullhead starts singing with her. Story 7. Ivan Boatwright was 84 years old, and he had no patience left for foolishness. He lived alone in a small cottage deep in the English countryside, far enough from the nearest village that most people considered him stubborn for staying there. Ivan considered that a compliment. The cottage had belonged to his family for years. It had thick stone walls, a crooked chimney, a wooden front door heavy enough to stop a charging bull, and windows so old the glass seemed to wrinkle in the rain. It was not fancy. It was not modern, but it was his. Age had taken a few things from Ivan. His knees complained every morning. His hands ached when the weather turned cold. His memory sometimes wandered away in the middle of a sentence and returned with no apology. His eyes watered when he read too long, and he often found himself standing in a room with no idea why he had entered it. But life had given him something age could not take easily: hardness. Ivan had survived enough winters, enough grief, enough bad men, and enough strange nights to know that independence was not a mood. It was a discipline. So he cooked for himself. He cleaned when the dust became too insulting to ignore. He repaired what broke, if his hands allowed it. He chopped firewood slowly but steadily, stacking it beneath the lean-to beside the house so the fireplace could burn through the coldest nights. He liked books. Old books, mostly. The newer ones were too loud, even when printed quietly on paper. Ivan preferred aged novels with cracked spines and yellowing pages, the sort of books that smelled of dust, ink, and forgotten rooms. In the evenings, after supper, he would sit in his worn armchair near the fireplace with a blanket over his knees, and read until sleep made the words blur. He was alone, yes, but loneliness and solitude were not the same thing. Ivan enjoyed solitude. People, on the other hand, exhausted him. There were a few neighbors who checked on him now and then. Not close neighbors, of course. In that part of rural England, neighbor could mean someone living half a mile away through the trees. They came by every so often with bread, eggs, gossip, or excuses. "Just making sure you haven't kicked the bucket yet, Ivan," Mrs. Holbrook would call from the gate. He always told her she would be the first to know if he did. They worried about him. He understood that. They worried about his age, his memory, the cold, the distance from town, and the fact that he refused to move into some neat little flat where nurses could check on him and the radiators never needed feeding with wood. He was grateful in his own way, but he assured them he was fine. He liked his quiet. He liked waking to the sound of birds rather than traffic. He liked the mist lying low over the fields in the morning. He liked the wind in the trees at night, the owl calls, the crackle of the fire, and the fact that no one knocked unless they had a very good reason, usually. The only real problems came from wildlife: foxes in the hen house, badgers tearing up the garden, rats in the shed, the occasional thing scratching at the walls after midnight that did not sound quite like any animal Ivan had ever learned to name. Those incidents were annoying but manageable. Ivan had a shovel, a shotgun, and very little fear left. Once every 2 weeks, he drove into town for groceries. He hated those trips. The roads were narrow and full of people who drove as if death were only a rumor. The market was worse: bright lights, loud voices, children staring at glowing little devices in their hands, grown adults blocking aisles while arguing into phones, Self-checkout machines that barked instructions like irritated school teachers. Civilization, in Ivan's opinion, had become far too noisy. Still, he needed petrol. He needed tea, tinned soup, bread, batteries, oats, matches, and occasionally a decent bit of meat if the butcher had not ruined it with foolish modern flavoring. So he went. Then he came home as quickly as possible. Home was where the world made sense. At least most nights. On the night in question, winter had settled hard over the countryside. Frost glazed the grass outside, and the trees beyond the cottage stood bare and black against the sky. The wind had dropped after sunset, leaving the land in a deep, listening silence. Ivan ate a simple dinner of stew and bread. He washed the bowl, checked the fire, locked the back door, and settled into his chair with a book he had read at least 6 times before. The story was familiar enough that he could drift in and out without losing the thread. The fire warmed his bones, the old clock ticked. The words softened. At some point, Ivan's watery eyes closed. He slept. He did not know how long. When he woke, it was not because of a dream. It was because something was wrong. Ivan opened his eyes slowly, stiff neck aching from the angle of sleep. The book had slipped from his lap to the floor. The fire had burned low, leaving red embers glowing beneath gray ash. The cottage was dark except for the fireplace and a small lamp on the side table. For a few seconds he sat still, trying to understand what had pulled him awake. Then came the knock, not a polite knock, not the sort of tap a neighbor might give in daylight. This was a slow, heavy rapping against the front door knocker. 3 strikes. Pause. 3 more. Ivan's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. He looked toward the window. Blackness pressed against the glass. It was very late, far too late for anyone decent to be wandering through the woods to his door. The knock came again, this time harder. Ivan pushed himself upright with a grunt. His knees cracked as he stood. For a moment, he wondered if perhaps one of the neighbors had an emergency. A car broken down, a child sick, a storm-damaged fence, something ordinary. But no headlights had swept across the front window. No voice had called his name. No one from the village came this far on foot after dark. Ivan crossed the room slowly, taking hold of the shotgun that rested near the fireplace. It was an old habit and an old friend. He moved to the front hall and stood behind the heavy oak door. "Who's there?" he called. His voice sounded rough from sleep. A pause followed. Then a voice answered from the other side, "Good evening, sir." The voice was male, soft, almost formal, yet something in it rubbed Ivan the wrong way. It had a wetness to it, as if the speaker's mouth were full of too much saliva. "This is private property," Ivan said. "State your business." There was a breath, long and trembling. "Please allow me Christian passage into your lovely cottage, sir," the stranger said. "For these lips are thirsty." Ivan frowned. Thirsty, he had expected many things: a lost hiker, a drunk, a fool. Not that. He did not open the door. "Then you should have stopped in the village," Ivan said. "There's a public house, a shop, and more than enough doors to trouble before mine." "How did you come to be this far in the forest at this hour?" The stranger breathed again. It was louder now, labored. "I have wandered a long way," he said. "I have found no other dwelling. I beseech you, open up for this lost and suffering soul." Ivan said nothing. The stranger continued. "For these chattering teeth crave nourishment." Ivan felt the skin between his shoulders tighten. The change was small, but he heard it. The voice had shifted. Not much, just enough. What at first sounded like a polite request now carried something beneath it. Hunger, perhaps, or amusement, or the confidence of something pretending to be weak because it expected the performance to work. Ivan had lived too long to be easily baited. "If you are truly in distress," he said, "step into the light by the window. Let me see your face." Silence. Ivan waited. The lamp inside cast a rectangle of weak yellow light through the nearby front window and onto the porch. Anyone honest could have stepped into it easily. Anyone in need would have done so without argument. But the figure outside did not move. Ivan could sense him there, standing just beyond the light, hiding. A decent man showed his face at another man's door. That was not just caution. It was manners. And Ivan still believed in manners. The seconds stretched. All he could hear was breathing. Not normal breathing either. It sounded strained, excited, like an animal trying to remain still while watching prey. "Step into the light," Ivan repeated. No reply. The doorknob turned. Lightly at first, a small test. Ivan looked down at it. The knob twisted again, harder this time. Then stopped. The stranger's breathing deepened. Ivan raised the shotgun. "I would advise against that," he said. For a moment, the creature outside tried to hold on to the polite act. "Please, sir," it whispered. "I am so very hungry." Then eat bark. The breathing stopped. Then came a low laugh. Not human. Not anymore. The doorknob rattled violently. The heavy door shook in its frame. Something struck the wood from the other side, once, twice, then scraped downward with a sound like nails against old bone. The stranger snarled. All politeness vanished. "Open the door, old man." Ivan stepped back just enough to bring the shotgun fully level with the center of the door. "Go away. These fangs hunger for warm blood," the thing hissed. "You will let me in. You will invite me. You will open this door and I will drink you dry." Ivan sighed. He was tired. Tired of the cold. Tired of aching bones. Tired of creatures creeping through the countryside thinking old age meant weakness. Tired of patching the same cursed door every few months because every ghoul, beast, and blood-drinking freak in the county seemed to think his cottage was an easy supper. "I apologize," Ivan called. The thing outside paused. Ivan's voice became dry and calm. "These old joints in my trigger finger are swollen with arthritis. Sometimes they twitch, quite involuntarily." He shifted his grip. "Like this." The shotgun blast tore through the front door. The sound filled the cottage like thunder trapped in a box. Splinters burst outward. Smoke rolled through the hall. Something on the porch shrieked, a high, tearing sound that became a wet howl. Ivan did not wait. He broke open the shotgun, loaded another shell with practiced hands, and stepped toward the door. Something heavy thrashed outside. He unlocked the door and pulled it open. Cold night air poured in. On the porch lay the caller, or what was left of him. He had been tall, too tall for a man. His coat hung in tatters around a body half human and half beast. Pale skin stretched over long limbs, but patches of coarse gray fur grew along his arms and throat. His face had split forward into a muzzle crowded with black gums and yellow fangs. One milky eye rolled toward Ivan. The other was gone. The shotgun had punched a smoking hole through his chest. The creature twitched, claws scraping weakly against the porch boards. Ivan looked down at him. "Christian passage," he muttered. "Cheeky bastard." The thing tried to lift its head. Ivan fired again. This time it stopped moving. For a while he stood there in the open doorway listening. The forest beyond the porch remained still. No answering howls. No movement between the trees. No second visitor waiting in the dark. Ivan closed the door as well as he could with the new hole in it and set the latch. Then he went to the kitchen, made tea, and sat at the table while his hands stopped trembling. They always trembled afterward, not from fear, he told himself, from age, from the recoil, from annoyance. Mostly annoyance. By morning, the corpse had begun to shrink. They usually did. The long limbs drew inward. The fur thinned. The muzzle softened. By daylight, most things preferred to look almost human again, as if death itself were embarrassed by what they had been. Ivan dragged the body behind the shed using a rope and a great deal of swearing. He buried it in the far patch of hard ground where the nettles grew thick. It was not the first grave there, not even close. He patched the door with a spare plank and made a note to buy better screws next time he went into town. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Holbrook stopped by with a loaf of bread and a jar of marmalade. She saw the fresh board on the door. "What happened there?" she asked. "Wood rot," Ivan said. She narrowed her eyes. "In the shape of a shotgun blast?" "Very aggressive wood rot." She looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "You sure you're all right, Ivan?" "I'm perfectly fine." "Still not kicked the bucket, then?" "Not yet." She smiled faintly and handed him the bread. "Well, if anything strange happens, you call someone." Ivan almost laughed. Instead, he nodded. Of course, that evening he chopped more firewood than usual. His shoulder hurt afterward, but it was worth it. The temperature dropped hard after sunset, and the frost returned to the windows. He cooked supper, washed up, and settled into his chair with his old book. The patched door looked ugly. He would fix it properly when the weather improved. The fire crackled, the clock ticked. The countryside returned to its silence. Ivan opened his book and found the page where he had fallen asleep the night before. For a while, all was peaceful. Then far off in the trees, something howled. Ivan did not look up from the page. "Wait your turn," he said. The howl faded. Ivan smiled to himself, just a little. People in town thought rural living was quiet. They imagined fresh air, birdsong, fields, tea by the fire, and the peaceful company of one's own thoughts. They were not entirely wrong. Solitary country living was peaceful. You simply had to know how to protect the peace.